Welcome back, listeners. I know it's been a time, but such is the prevarications of life and working. Today, I've got a little existential crisis for everyone to ruminate on. Let me tell you about the two ways the world is going to end because of AI. The first AI ending you've probably heard of. It's called Grey Goo. A man named Eric Drexler coined it in a book called Engines of Creation back in 1986. Drexler is one of the godfathers of nanotechnology, and he was sketching out the nightmare scenario. You build a microscopic machine that can self-replicate, build copies of themselves out of whatever is lying around. And one day, one of them doesn't know when to stop. So it makes two, and two makes four, and four makes eight, and they keep eating your car, your house, the trees, the ocean, you turning all of it into more copies of themselves until the whole planet is just this warm, humming sludge of identical little machines. The scientists have a word for it: ecophagy, the eating of the world. It doesn't end in fire, it ends in gelatinous goo. That's the loud apocalypse. That's the one with the movie trailer. That's the one that everybody's terrified of. But I want to tell you about another one, a quieter one. There's a manga I read. It's called Blame. It's by Tsunomu Nihei. It started back in 1997, and it's one of the most genuinely unsettling things I've ever put in front of my eyeballs. Liminal spaces, cosmic horrors, everything all wrapped into one. Well, here's the setup. It's a far future. Humans built a vast automated infrastructure run by machines called builders, and humanity steered the whole thing through something called the netsphere. Basically, it was an admin login right into human DNA as this thing called the net terminal gene. Safe, right? All the humans had this net terminal gene. It would allow us to control things then on out. If you carried the gene, you had authority. You could tell the system what to do. And crucially, you could tell it to stop. And then the gene got lost. Some retrovirus came and wiped out of the entire human population. Not the population. All the people didn't die. The retrovirus just wiped out the gene. So anyone who had the gene ended up dying. And here's the part that kept me up at night. The machines didn't turn evil after that. They didn't rise up. They didn't hate anybody. They just lost their instructions. And with no one left alive who could log in and say, enough, the builders just kept doing the one thing they knew how to do and were told to do. Build this infrastructure, build this city. So they built, chaotically, indefinitely, and, for the purpose of the story, forever. The structure they built, the characters in it, they just call it the city. It grew until it essentially filled the solar system, layer upon layer of architecture. Scaffold upon a scaffold, sprawling up past the orbit of Jupiter, over 1 billion kilometers of perfectly engineered, utterly purposeless construction. It was mostly empty, mostly silent, although there were enclaves of humans all throughout it. And the hero of this story, he just walks through. 10 volumes just walking through this massive liminal structure, looking for a single human, any single human, who still potentially carried the gene, the login, that could make it all stop. Spoiler, he really doesn't find them. That's a quiet apocalypse. It doesn't eat the world, it builds it. Forever. Because nobody kept the password that said enough. So here's my question for you tonight. Where are we, right now, on that curve? Well, we're definitely not at Grey Goo. I'm still here recording my podcast. And we're not at the Dyson sphere of empty hallways the size of the solar system. But we are somewhere. We're at that very first machine. The larva. The first little self-replicating blob of build for the sake of building. And that blob, well, it landed in my inbox a couple weeks ago. Well, right now it'll be a couple months ago. It was 180 pages long. One of my engineers, real sharp person. This is part of an awesome team. We do part of real AI talent. Let me preface this by saying this is not a story about somebody who doesn't get it. This person is phenomenal. I'd asked for an analysis on the comparison of AI orchestration frameworks. A real specific question. We wanted to figure out what we were going to leverage for this product we were building. And a real decision riding on it. I needed the answer by a Friday a couple months ago so we could get our initial draft design before the architecture review board. What came back of that question was a 180-page paper. It was beautiful. There were charts. There were appendices. There was an executive summary that had its own executive summary. There was a glossary. None of this I asked for. I just said, hey, I needed an analysis on these orchestrators. And honestly, my first reaction was, wow, this is phenomenal. Respect, because somebody had token maxed the absolute hell out of this thing. But then I tried to use it. The actual answer, the analysis results that I needed, it was about 4 paragraphs long, buried somewhere around page 60. The other 179 pages were technically accurate. Lots of detail. It was phenomenal. Beautifully formatted, It was plausible sounding, very confident, lots of detailed information and references, but it was completely beside the point. The question and the answer could have been 5 pages. That's the larva. That's the first builder, laying the first brick of a structure that, if left alone, wants to grow to the orbit of Jupiter. Confident, competent, just good enough slop. And it's dangerous for exactly the reason it's everywhere. It's almost free to make, and it looks really, really intelligent. Welcome back to Transmissions from Elysium. Welcome to Sloppageddon. Okay, so last episode, I know it's been about 2 months now. If you missed it, go back. This one stands on its own, but they're really a match set. In the last episode, I made the argument about friction. Short version, too long, didn't listen. Friction is not a bug. It's the function. The struggle of doing the work is also the work. Remove the friction, and the person doing the work atrophies. The same way a muscle atrophies when you take away the weight. That episode was about the input side. What happens to the human when you let them stop thinking? This episode, however, is about the output side. Because here's the thing that nobody's really talking about. When you remove the friction of making something, you don't just get a more relaxed maker. You get more of something. A lot more of something. The friction wasn't only protecting the maker. The friction was the only thing rationing the volume. Think about what effort used to do. Effort was a tax on production. If writing a 10-page memo took you 4 hours, you wrote that 10-page memo approximately never. And when you did, it was only when it really mattered. And then you spent 3 of those 4 hours figuring out what you were going to actually cut. Effort is what capped the noise. Not because anyone designed it to, just because there are only so many hours and you, a finite human or a finite team, had to choose. Now, take that tax to zero. Take the tax of producing something and make it zero. And that cap comes off. Now, the 10-page memo costs you 90 seconds and a decent prompt. So does the 180-page report. Why would it just be 5 pages when it can be 180? 5 pages versus 100 pages costs you exactly the same now. They cost you nothing. So you ship the 180 pages because it looks more and more. And somewhere a dashboard ticks up and you feel productive. And every single person downstream of you pays for it. That's the whole episode, folks. I'm done here. No, but let me actually earn it, because I promised you a flood of a couple dead authors and a number with a $sign on it. So gray goo in the city. They're the same disease, but at 2 different scales. Replication that forgot how to stop. But I didn't open with them just to router you. I opened with them because there's a third version of this story, much older and much smaller, and it's the only one of the 3 that comes with a cure. It's been running this exact same metaphor for almost 220 years, and is better than anything I could invent. You know The Sorcerer's Apprentice? Most of you probably are familiar with it from Fantasia, Mickey, the hat, the brooms, and the water. But it's older than that. Goethe wrote it in a poem in 1797. The apprentice situation is very simple and very relatable. The old sorcerer steps out. There's a chore to do. Haul water, fill the cistern, the boring physical grind of it. And the apprentice thinks, hey, I'm clever. I've been watching. Why should I haul the water by hand like an animal? I know a little magic now. I'll enchant the broom to do it. And it works. That's the trap. It works. The broom grabs a bucket and starts hauling water. And for about 90 seconds, the apprentice is the smartest guy in the room. Feet up, the friction's gone. Then the cistern is full. But the broom keeps going, because the apprentice learned the spell to start the broom. He never learned this spell to stop it. So the water keeps coming, the room starts to flood, and the apprentice, panicking now, does the thing we all do when automation goes sideways. He attacks it with force. He grabs an axe and chops the broom in half. And now there are 2 brooms, both hauling water, twice the flood. And this is a part that everybody seems to forget, and it's a part that matters. The slop doesn't divide when you fight it, it multiplies. You reply to the 180-page report with a 3-pointed question, and you get back 400-page response that addresses all 3 plus a new appendix. You chop the broom, and now there are 400 pages. The water rises, the apprentice is drowning in the consequences of his own labor-saving brilliance, and the chore, fill the cistern, was so small. That's the cruelty of it. The task was nothing. The flood is everything. Hold on to that broom. We're coming back to it. And I promise you the ending is the most important part. Now, I could just stand here, or sit here, and tell you that slop is bad. And you'd nod your head, and we both feel good, and nothing would change. So let me give you the receipts, because somebody finally went out and measured this, and the number is genuinely funny. Back a year or so ago, September 2025, researchers out of the Stanford Social Media Lab and a group called Better Up Labs published a piece in the Harvard Business Review, and they coined a word, and it's perfect. It's called work slop. Their definition, and I'm paraphrasing this only slightly, work slop is AI-generated work content that masquerades as good work, but lacks the substance to meaningfully move the task forward. Let me read that again. Masquerades as good work. That's the 180 pages. That's the tell. It's not bad work. Bad work you'd catch. Handwritten chicken scratch turned in on the back of a soggy napkin. The work slop is work cosplaying as good work. They surveyed about 1,150 full-time U.S. workers, and here's what they came back. Now, this is September 2025, almost a year ago. Imagine how things have changed since then. 40% of them had received work slop in the last month. Not in their career, in the last month. And when people did the math on the cleanup, each individual instance of work slop costs the person on the receiving end about 2 hours. 2 hours to read the thing, realize it's hollow, figure out what was actually being asked, redo it per instance. They put a dollar figure on it. About $186 per employee per month, just in the invisible tax of dealing with other people's slop. Scale that to your big Fortune 500 company, and the researchers land somewhere around $9 million a year per organization, evaporating into the clump of confident, well-formatted nonsense. And here's the little detail I love. The one that really should make every leader listening sit up. Where does work slop flow? You'd assume down, right? Junior people firing slop up their way at the busy bosses. And yeah, 18% of it goes up the ladder. But it also flows sideways, peer to peer. And that's really the bulk of it. 16% of it does flow down. Managers slopping their own teams. Leaders sending their people AI-generated garbage and calling it delegation. But it gets better. They asked people how they felt about the colleague who sent them slop. 53% were annoyed. 22% were straight up offended. And about half said now they thought their coworker as less creative, less capable, and less reliable. Sit with that one if you're tempted to hit send on something you didn't read. The thing you're sending to look productive is actually making the people around you think you're dumber. The slop is a reverse resume. And the cherry on top, from a separate MIT study floating around the same time, 95% of organizations report no measurable return on their AI investments. None. Zero. So let me connect those two numbers, because they tell the whole story. Productivity didn't vanish. It got transferred. You felt productive generating the report in 90 seconds. The feeling was real. But the work didn't disappear, it moved downstream to every reader, multiplied by however many people had to open the thing. You didn't save 2 hours, you spent 90 seconds to create 2 hours of work, and then handed it to somebody else with interest. Sloppageddon isn't a productivity revolution, it's a productivity loan, and the rates are predatory. Okay, so why does this keep happening? We're all smart people. Why do we keep doing it? There's a beautiful old idea from this, and it comes from a guy named Herbert Simon, who's going to show up twice in this episode because he basically predicted the entire mess from inside the 1950s to the 70s, which is kind of irritating of him. In 1956, Simon coined a word, satisficing. It's a mashup of satisfy and suffice. And his observation was that human beings, when we make decisions, very rarely optimize. We don't find the best option, we find the first option that usually clears the bar of good enough. And then we stop. We satisfice. And Simon's whole point of this was that it is smart. It's adaptive. You don't read every cereal box in the aisle. Optimizing everything would paralyze you. Good enough, most of the time, is genuinely good enough. But here's where that breaks. Satisficing was turned into a world where producing good enough still costs something. The bar was good enough, sure, but clearing it took effort. And that effort accidentally dragged the quality up along the way. You couldn't produce good enough garbage in bulk because producing anything, that was the expensive part. AI, however, severs all of that. For the first time in human history, good enough is free and infinite. The model will hand you good enough forever, at zero marginal cost, faster than you can read it. So the very instinct that used to serve us, stop at good enough, now turns into a fire hose. We're satisficing at industrial scale. We accept the first plausible draft every time because it's right there, and it's fine, and we ship it, and we move on. And that's the curse. Not good enough as a standard, good enough as a reflex, pointed at the machine that never got tired of giving it to you. And this is a flippable episode, so listen for it. Last time I told you the new senior skill was filtering. Learning to stand in front of 100 pages of slop and pull in the 3 that matter. That's still true, and a few of you wrote to me about it. But filtering is in the receiver's job. It's defense. This episode is about the offense. It's not about being the source. The most respectful, most senior thing you can do for your whole organization is just not put the slop in the system in the first place. Don't make everyone downstream filter because of your laziness. Filter it yourself before you hit send. That's secure. But there's a deeper problem under the volume. And it's not just too much. It's that volume actively destroys the thing it's supposed to be delivering. It destroys signal. There's a 1-paragraph story by Jorge Luis Borges, the Argentine writer, called On Exactitude of Science. It's from 1946, and it's maybe 100 words long, which, given this episode, is a flex on his part. Here's the whole thing. There's an empire. The empire becomes obsessed with cartography, with making better and better maps. And the map makers get so good, so thorough, so committed to capturing everything, that eventually they produce the ultimate map. A map of the empire that is the exact size of the empire. 1-to-1. Every rock, every road, every grain of sand, rendered at full scale. And the map is, of course, completely useless. You can't fold it, you can't read it, you can't carry it. A map that's the size of the territory tells you nothing the territory didn't already tell you. So they abandon it. Borges ends up with the image of the tattered map, this ruins of the perfect useless map, rotting away in the desert, inhabited by animals and beggars. That report was a 180 pages map of a 5-page territory. It contained everything, which is precisely why it located nothing. The whole value of the map is what it leaves out. A map is useful in exact proportion to how much of reality it has the discipline to omit. The omission is the product. And this is where Herbert Simon comes back in, from 1971 this time, with the single most prophetic sentence about our era that I know of, written before the internet even existed. He wrote, "A wealth of information creates a poverty of attention." Information isn't free to consume. It eats attention. And attention is the actual scarce resource, not information. Never information again. So when you flood me with 180 pages, you're not being generous with information. You're being a thief of attention. You're strip mining the one thing I can't get more of. Now, and I want to be very careful and honest here because this is the part that people get wrong. None of this is new. AI did not invent the bloated document. Let's not pretend there was some golden age of crisp human memos before the robots came. I have received, and actually I've created a ton, of soul-crushing 200,000 word, no AI insight emails from human beings my entire career. The padded report, the meeting that should have been a sentence, the deck with 400 slides for one idea. We've been doing Sloppageddon by hand for decades. We buried the lead. We padded it to look thorough. We confuse length with rigor and volume with effort. The disease is human and it is older than the internet. AI didn't start the fire. AI has just removed the last thing that was containing it, which was effort. The cost of producing noise used to be the only thing keeping any one person's noise bounded. One windbag could only generate so much per day, because even being a windbag is tiring. We took the tiring part away. So now that windbag is a fleet of brooms, and the fire has all the oxygen it could ever want. Alright. I don't like leaving people in the diagnosis mode, which is what this episode's been so far. Last episode, I gave you prescriptions and people like that, so here are 5 for this one. And they're aimed squarely at software leaders, but they translate to anybody who produces things other people have to read. The whole kit reduces 4 skills, really. Brevity, conclusion, nuance, and discernment. But skills are abstract, so let me try to make them a little bit more concrete. The first one, lead with the answer. Bottom line up front. The military actually has a name for this, bluff. Bottom line up front. The first sentence of the thing is the decision, the ask, or the answer. Not the background, not the methodology, not the as you know in today's rapidly evolving landscape. The answer. If the reader stops reading after sentence 1, and assume that most will, because they're drowning too, they should distill and walk away with the point. Here's a kicker, and it's the oldest joke in writing. Pascal, in 1657, closes a letter with a line that's been recycled ever since. I have made this longer than usual because I have not had the time to make it shorter. Brevity is not the easy path. Brevity is the expensive path. The 180 pages is what lazy looks like now. 5 type pages is what work looks like. When you make the reader do the compression, you haven't saved labor, you've just refused to do yours and shipped it downstream to a dozen people. The second one. Use the broom to start, but never to finish. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not anti-AI. You should know this by now. I use these tools every hour of every day. So let me draw the line exactly where it actually is. AI is phenomenal at the blank page. Brainstorm with it. Have an outline. Have it do the first pass research. Argue the other side. Find your gaps. Stress test your logic. Generate the 40 bad ideas so you can find the 2 good ones. Those are all legitimate, awesome uses of use case of AI that I use every day. These all accelerate, not substitute. And that's the line I drew last episode, and it still holds here. But the compression needs to stay with you. The deciding what to cut, that's not the annoying part of the work that you get to skip. That is the work. That's where the thinking lives. I've got a documented case of verbal diarrhea, and I think everyone who's read my work knows this by now. My first draft of anything is like 800,000 words of parenthetical asides, and yes, I hear the irony. This is a 30-minute episode of being concise. Asking the model to help me cut 800 pages down to 5 is a good use. The thinking already happened. I'm getting an editor, asking the model to generate 150 for me from a one-line prompt, and shipping it unread. That's the abdication. Same tool, opposite act. The difference is whether you did the compression or paid someone 180 pages to avoid it. And please, you don't need a dissertation of purple prose to prove you did the work. The dissertation is a tell that you didn't. Nobody is confident in their answer, pads it to 180 pages. The padding is the insecurity showing. The third thing, right size the payload. This is discernment, and it's a hard one. Here's where I have to be honest, because the cheap version of this episode is everything should be short. And that's wrong. And you'd be right to call me on it. Some things generally need to be long. A security post-mortem after a real incident needs every detail, because the detail is load-bearing, somebody's going to litigate it. A serious architecture RFC needs its full reasoning. A legal contract is long on purpose. The edge cases are the point. Length is not the enemy. Unjustified length is the enemy. The skill is matching the size of the artifact to the weight of the decision writing on it. And this is exactly what good storytelling has always known. Ask anyone who studies why stories stick. The Heath brothers wrote a whole book on it called Made to Stick, and they'll tell you the enemy is the curse of knowledge. Once you know a whole bunch about a whole lot of different things, you can't really imagine which parts the listener actually needs. So you dump all of it on them, and you bury the one beat that matters. A great story is defined by everything the teller had, the discipline to leave out. Same as a map. As long as it needs to be and not one broom longer. Knowing which is which, that's the senior skill. That's the judgment you're actually going to be paid for now. Number 4, price the reader's time. Put it on the books. Every document has 2 costs, but here in the modern workplace, we only ever count one. There's a cost to produce it, and then there's a cost to consume it. We spent 3 years obsessing over the production cost. Faster, cheaper, more. AI drove it to basically 0. And in celebration, everyone forgot that the consumption cost didn't move at all. A human still reads at the same speed our grandparents did. And consumption cost gets multiplied by every single person who has to open the thing. So change the unit of the count. Stop optimizing for your 90 seconds. Optimize for the reader's 2 hours. And remember, the work slop study said it's literally what each instance costs. 2 hours times every recipient. A document that takes you a painful extra hour to tighten, read by 30 people, just bought back 30 hours minus 1. That's the best trade in the building, and most teams have it exactly backward. Respect the reader's attention and actual value with actual teeth, not just a poster. And 5, the last one here. Leaders, you've got to model this, and you've got to reward it with your teams. This is the one I tattoo on a CTO's forehead if they let me. Last episode I talked about the Bandura modeling. The research says that people learn more from what their leaders do than from anything their leaders say. It applies here with a vengeance. If you forward AI slop to your team will forward AI slop to each other. Remember, 16% of work slop flows down from managers. You are very possibly patient zero. If the boss sends a 180-page thing, the 180-page thing is now the standard, no matter what the all-hands said. So do the opposite, visibly. Send the 5-page version and say out loud, I cut this down from 180. Here's what I left out and why. Make concession a thing that gets noticed. In your reviews, in your promotions. Stop rewarding volume. Output is free now. Free things aren't signal. Reward the person who walked in with 100 pages of AI sludge and walked out with 3 things that matter and the confidence to throw the rest away. That person is your senior engineer of 2027 beyond. Whatever their title says, promote that. You are, every single day, either training brooms or training masters. Pick on purpose. Which brings us back to the apprentice, standing knee-deep, then waist-deep in his own brilliant flood, hacking at brooms that just keep multiplying. You remember how it actually ends? The apprentice doesn't save himself. He can't. He started something he doesn't know how to stop, and the water keeps rising, and the brooms keep splitting, and he's done. Whatever saves him is that old sorcerer coming home. The master walks in, takes one look at the chaos, and speaks a single word, and the brooms freeze, and the water drains, and the flood is over. Here's the one thing I want you to take out of this episode. The master's power in that moment is not that he can summon more water than the apprentice. They both know that spell. Summoning is easy. Summoning is the part the apprentice already had. The master's power is that he knows the word that makes it stop. That's really all the whole job is now. That's the senior skill, the leadership skill, the human skill that machines have not touched and aren't close to touching. Not generation. Generation is solved. Generation is free. Generation is a flooded basement full of brooms. The scarce thing, the expensive thing, the thing worth paying for and promoting for and protecting is judgment about when to stop, what to cut, what to leave, when the cistern is full, when it's time to put the buckets down. My engineer didn't fail because they couldn't produce. They produced 108 gorgeous pages. They're clearly capable as hell. They failed because nobody told them out loud that the job was never to produce the most. The job was to know which 5 pages mattered and have the nerve to delete the other 175. And that's harder. It'll always be harder. And that's exactly why it's a thing worth getting good at. And remember what actually happens in Blame. They didn't lose the word in some dramatic last stand. Retrovirus quietly deleted the gene that carried it, and login could save enough, clean out of human genome. And then everyone left, spent the rest of forever wandering a structure the size of the solar system and continuing to grow, hunting for one person who still had it or hopefully evolved again. That's a real warning buried in all this. It was never that the machines would build too much. It's that we'd breathe the off switch out of ourselves. Reward it out, promote it out, optimize it out until one day nobody on the team carries that gene anymore. The ability to look at 180 pages and say, cut it to 5. That's with the net terminal gene. Don't let it go extinct on your watch. We took the water hauling away, fine, good even. But somebody in the room still has to know the word that stops the brooms. Be the one who knows the word. Be the master, not the apprentice. I'll see you next time.